Okay, so this is Mr. Wyrick. I'm going over the parts of the test review just real quick. On this one, we're talking about points of discontinuity, what's holes, what's asymptotes. I'm going to skip the ones on the top. They're already factored. You can see real easily by just looking at the bottom. The ones down here on the bottom, especially like number 5, we end up with x minus 4 over x minus 4 and x plus 2. From that factored form, that minus 4 means that at x equals a positive 4, that would make that 0. It matches top to bottom, so that would be a hole at that x equals 4. When that factor matches top to bottom, that's what makes it to where it's going to make a hole in the graph. On this one, the x plus 2 means that at x equals negative 2, negative 2 plus 2 would be 0. At x equals negative 2, we have an asymptote there. All of these are going to work that way, okay? Numbers 5 and 6, same kind of thing. This would be x plus 5 and x minus 4 over x plus 5 and x plus 6. The reduced form would be without the plus 5s. It'd be x minus 4 over x plus 6. But you also have to take into account the full factored form when you have any restrictions. The same thing, it's like the holes and variables, they just want you to name them. So x cannot be negative 5 or negative 6 because that would make 0 on the bottom. When we are supposed to add and subtract down here, I'll try to catch one of these that's a little bit more difficult. So we'll take a look at number 2. This x squared plus 2x minus 24 is x plus 6 and x minus 4. The x squared minus 11x minus 28 is x minus 4 and x minus 7. So you're going to multiply the other side by the factor it does not have. So this would be x minus 7 over x minus 7. Remember, if there's simpler ways to get to a common denominator, that's all we need is a common denominator put together so that we can add or subtract. This is going to be x squared minus 7x when I distribute that x over here. And then on this side, the x plus 3, it's going to get multiplied by x plus 6 over x plus 6. I don't have to multiply by the x minus 4 because I already have it on both sides. This is going to require that you use the boxes or FOIL, something like that. It's going to make x squared plus 9x plus 18. I'm subtracting those. That's all over x minus 7, x minus 4, x plus 6. The order doesn't really matter. Okay? X squared minus x squared leaves me no x squareds. Negative 7x minus 9 gives me a negative 16x. And then minus 18 gives me minus 18. That's over all three again, x minus 7, x minus 4, x plus 6. That's as reduced as it gets. On the test, when we do this, don't multiply this stuff back together. Leave it in factored form. If there's going to be more than one binomial that shows up on the top or bottom of the answer, factored form is how I want to see it. Okay, so make sure you factor that stuff out. That's how all those add, subtract are going to kind of go. You can, of course, run by and ask me questions if you have other questions. The multiply and divide, when we're looking at the back, there's only really one multiply question that's even going to be like what we have on the test, and that's this right here, number 16. That's x minus 8 and x plus 3 over 2x times x plus 3, and it's multiplied by 5x squared over 8 minus x. I can make this 8 minus x look like my x minus 8 if I will factor out a negative 1. So I'm going to do that. I factor out a negative 1 and I change this to x minus 8. It changes the signs when I divide by a negative 1. Now that they match top to bottom, I can eliminate that x minus 8. The x plus 3 matches top to bottom. This x squared over x, ignore the numbers for a second, x squared over x would reduce to just a single x on the top. So I've got a 5x on the top of my fraction. I've got a 2 and a negative 1 on the bottom. That's negative 2. Okay, reduce it as far as you can possibly reduce it. When we end up with 1, I'll go ahead down here to number 20. We're supposed to be dividing. This is w squared minus 5w minus 24. That's, oh, well, that's the same factors as the other one. That's boring. Whatever. This would be w minus 8 and w plus 3. That's over w plus 1. This side, because it's divide, I'm going to flip it. This goes to the top. That'll be w minus 7 and w plus 1. On the bottom, I have w plus 3. The stuff that I have that matches up top to bottom is the w plus 1s and the w plus 3s. So I have w minus 8 and w minus 7 on the top. That's how I would leave it. Now, there's not going to be one exactly like this on tomorrow's test, because the ones on tomorrow's test will have things left in both the numerator and the denominator, because that's what the questions are about. So I don't want you to have one that's looking at blank. But again, if I have two factors, don't multiply them back together. This is a free response kind of test, and there's no way really to type w squared into a Google form. So you have to leave them as those separate factors. I've made it to where if you put it in either direction, like on something like this, w minus 8 and w minus 7 would be an acceptable answer. It would count that as correct. And w minus 7 and w minus 8 in the other order would also be an acceptable answer. So the order of them doesn't matter, but do make sure you're putting them in those parentheses. Okay? If it's just one factor, I set it up to accept the answers whether they're in parentheses or not. But if it's two factors, you do need to make sure that you have the parentheses around them. Okay? If there's any question about how you type something in on the test, just type in what you got. I'll be able to see your response. And if you got it wrong, you can just ask me about it. I'll go back through and look at the test. And if it's something that I should have counted as correct, then I'll go back and fix it. Like, I'm not worried about that kind of stuff. I am going to, like, you will be able to see grades right after you're done and check on it. So that should help you out. The graphing. This is the last thing that's on the test. 4 to the right would be 1 over x minus 4. The h value moves it left and right. Down 3 would be minus 3 out here on the k value. Okay, the h value is always opposite. 4 to the right would be plus 4, but it's going to be minus. Down 3 is just minus 3. We leave it that way. And the graph would look 4 to the right, 1, 2, 3, 4. Down 3, 1, 2, 3. There's my asymptotes. That's the intersection. And it goes like this and like this. No big deal. If you do have your Chromebook, you can open up another tab on Desmos. I'm totally cool with that. If you don't have your Chromebook, you'll have to use your phone. And on your phone, you need to be just on that Google Doc, so you'll have to use the calculator. Okay? All right. Hopefully that helps you out. If not, make sure you stop by tutorials in the morning.